I don't know whether you heard my conversation with Joanna Nichols, but it was one of those very frustrating sort of conversations, the like of which you have with some rather kind of what you might say woke school teachers, where you can't actually get any truth out of them. You just get a kind of, you know, word salad mixture of you know, apologies but which are not really apologies, and explanations that are not really explanations, and justifications for why the system isn't wrong.
Yes, exactly. Just very evasive, I thought, and they often are, these kinds of people in positions of influence and authority. You know, Sara Sharif, the truth about this awful, heinous murder is that, of course, it's on her father and her stepmother. They are responsible for killing this child. But it shames the whole nation, because social workers ought to have taken action earlier. They knew something was terribly wrong. School teachers were aware that something was going wrong. This is a girl who essentially died in public. People could see that she had wounds and bruises and bite marks and so on. They knew that this was evidence of something catastrophic and evil, and yet insufficient action was taken. So it's not good enough for leading social workers to say, well, let's wait, let's not use hindsight, let's bide our time until we get the report. No, people want answers now. We want to know how in 2024 a girl like this could die, even though people in positions of authority knew that she was in trouble.
Yeah, exactly right. And all this business of, you know, it's sort of a new thing. No, we mustn't talk about anything until we've seen the final report. Well, why? You know, that's just, to me, evasion. All that means is that, you know, you're trying to shut down conversation about something which is very clearly been a court case where you know, evidence has been presented which is not presented as if it's not true. It's presented as truth. And so the idea that after a court case and after a man has been convicted of murder and after the young girl in question is dead, that you can't come to any conclusions is ridiculous.
Yeah, people want to talk about it now, and we have the right to talk about it. And I hate this attitude where you always get bureaucrats saying, well, don't engage your prejudiced views and your stupid chit-chat. Wait until we do our expert report and then we'll talk about it. It's just this kind of very aloof attitude to these problems. The truth of the matter is, the harsh truth of the matter is, that by the time this report comes out, sadly, the news cycle will have moved on and people will be talking about Sara Sharif. That's the tragic reality. People want to talk about her situation now. They want to talk about it because her father and stepmother have been found guilty, and because they know that there are lots and lots of questions that need to be answered, and they need to be answered urgently rather than being put off into some stiff report that hardly anyone will read.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the same people who are sitting there saying, oh, I'm not defending it, I'm not justifying it, are basically sitting there hoping to safeguard their jobs. You know, there'll be people in Surrey, and I think we've got a clip which we're going to play you at some point later on in this hour of the head of Children's Services or Social Services, I think in Wiltshire, who basically blamed it all on the Tories, who came out and went, oh, well, it's all because we've had our budgets cut and we haven't had any money and we can't, you know, do the job properly. And if you keep criticising social workers like this, nobody will want to do the job.
Yeah, you know, there's a real back-covering approach in the bureaucracy. People are very often more interested in covering their backs and making sure they don't get into trouble or making sure that serious questions don't dangle over their heads than they are in getting to the truth. You know, when you have these kind of creaking bureaucracies, and social work has become one of those, then it becomes a self-interested entity. It becomes very much about self-protection. How do we preserve our jobs? How do we preserve our power? How do we preserve our social influence? And anything that interferes with that, such as the awkward questions around Sara Sharif's death, they bat away or they put it into a boring report or whatever. So this kind of back-covering instinct in the elites, I think that's something that really needs to be challenged too.
I know. Well, listen, I think we've now got this clip. Let's have a look at this. Professor Ray Jones, former Director of Social Services in Wiltshire.
Now, one of the things that you need to face up to, is that in the last 14 years, children's social services in this country have been cut back year on year on year. Police have withdrawn from the community. We don't have community policing now because of cuts within policing. You know what's happening in terms of the health service and the difficulties of doing the job there. So the context in which people are trying to do a really difficult, challenging job, often without all the information that becomes available later on. If you want to take them off the pitch, It's not going to be the solution.
Right. This is not personal, but it's going to become personal. Not against you. It's because I'm a father. And I'll tell you what I don't agree with what you've just said. I absolutely guarantee, and I knew and I understand, 14 years of Tory austerity, there are less social workers, there are less police. I rail against that every day. But do me a favour, Professor Ray Jones. If you want to sack people, they won't be on the pitch. Then the team's not good enough. Let me ask you. You said you did this 52 years. You said you were a director for 14 years. Are you ready for this? Neighbours, don't tell me about information afterwards. Neighbours heard gut-wrenching screams from the home and reported to social services for 2.5 years. Concerned teachers recorded seeing bruises on this poor little mite's body and told social services over 2.5 years. Police were called and social services, astonishingly, did nothing. Now, I know, and I mean this with my hand on my heart, that social services do an amazing amount of work, but you cannot in any way tell me that that is not the most awful incompetence. That's not based on not having information or hours. That is based on complete incompetence. And I'll go further. The people that didn't look into this girl's death have blood on their hands, Ray.
Yeah, Ray's another one that doesn't get it, really, Brendan. You know, you can't blame incompetence on political decision-making.
You know, what a snivelling, grotesque excuse to say that, oh, it's because of cuts, it's because of austerity, it's because social work services were trimmed in certain areas. That is such a ridiculous excuse for the failures that seem to have taken place in this case, because you don't need thousands and thousands of social workers to deal with this one clearly horrible case. You don't need loads and loads of money to deal with this kind of case. You just need a few social workers who are on their brief, who are alert, who are willing to listen to the worries of the neighbours and the complaints of school teachers, and who are willing to take action. That's the issue. It's not about how much funding there is. It's not about how many social workers there are. It's about whether the social workers we have the aptitude and the bravery to take action where it's necessary. And the problem, it seems to me, is that social workers have become very risk averse. They're unwilling to get involved in case they cause problems or become controversial. And as a consequence, and we've seen this a number of times in recent years, kids have died or kids have suffered. So there is a crisis in social work. It's not to do with funding. It's to do with their whole sense of mission, which I think they've lost.
Exactly right. And as if you wanted a real-time explanation for what things are going, how quickly things are going wrong, piece in the Telegraph this morning, Metropolitan Police workers, including 999 call handlers and child protection officers, believe it or not, have voted to go on strike for the right to spend more time working from home. Now, call me old-fashioned. If you're a child protection officer, I don't think you should be working from home. You should be in the office. You should be talking to people and finding out about what's going on. You shouldn't be sitting at home in your pyjamas with Netflix on in the corner, you know, not really paying attention to the emails you're getting.
You know, I found this story so shocking. So it's 2,400 Met officers will be affected by the request to go back to work, and so they've threatened to go on strike in order to save their right to stay at home and work at home. This is ridiculous. Anyone who has worked at home, I work at home some days in the week, everyone, if they're honest, they will say that they're a bit lazier when they work from home. Right? You sit around, you switch on the TV when you're having your lunch, you go for a walk. It's just a fact of life that when you work from home, because you're not under the cosh, you probably get less work done and you're a bit lazier and you do your own things sometimes. If police officers are doing that, that is terrifying, because these are the people who are supposed to be on the front line of preserving the public from harm and solving crime. You know, one of the things that the striking officers said is that they don't want the stress of working in an office. I'm sorry, but since when has it been stressful to work in an office? People have been working in offices for hundreds of years and they got along pretty well. I think this whole work from home culture has got to stop. Actually, we need to get back to this socialise in the office, going out for lunch, going to the pub after work, all of those great things that used to keep cities like London and other cities alive. We need to go back to that.
We really do. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Let me just finish up with that story from Tower Hamlets today, which is about the secondary school where more than half the pupils are eligible for free school meals because they don't have wealthy parents. They're being asked to fast for Gaza tomorrow because they want to try and raise the issue of starving children in Palestine. This is a central London borough which has got plenty of problems of its own, multiculturally apart from anything else. It's one of the places where I think more Palestinian flags were flown than Union Jacks were ever flown during the coronation.
I find this story really worrying, actually. You know, encouraging school kids to fast for Gaza is a form of political indoctrination. They are being brainwashed to be pro-Gaza and, by extension, anti-Israel. And we see this amongst young people all the time, this kind of knee-jerk Israelophobia. They have this rash hatred for the world's only Jewish state. We see it amongst school kids. We see it amongst university students. We see it on the streets when they have those stupid hate marches they've been having. All of these kids who've been brainwashed with their kafirs around their necks into thinking that Israel is a uniquely barbarous nation. And that, I think, is giving rise to all sorts of problematic prejudices here in Britain against Jewish school kids and Jewish citizens. And we know that school kids at the Jewish Free School in northwest London, there was a period of time when they were told they could take off their blazers so no one would know that they were Jews. So we have serious problems in this country, and the fact that Jewish school kids have to hide their identity is something that should concern us all, and it certainly shouldn't give rise to this indoctrination into pro-Gaza politics in other schools.
No, absolutely right. Couldn't